We're here in Cardiff Bay, in front of the statue commemorating the British Antarctic expedition a century ago. 100 years on, the Antarctic is back in the headlines. This time it's over the climate change debate. At Pierhead Sessions later today, we will be talking to the climate change activist George Monbiot. He will deliver his verdict on the recent Copenhagen Climate Summit and talk about the issues surrounding the climate change debate. First of all, George Monbiot, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Oh, thanks. It's a great honour to be invited here, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you. During your speech that just took place downstairs, you pressed quite often that the international finger-pointing process can only be broken by very good examples. And you mentioned that Wales is actually on the right track. Do you think that Wales can have a leading role in climate change action, and do you think it will have the impact you hope?
Wales has got almost more potential than any other nation on earth to turn things round. I mean, we were the great fossil fuel economy, weren't we? We were built on coal. In fact, we built the United Kingdom on Welsh coal, really. The Industrial Revolution was largely powered by it. And so there's a great symbolic power in Wales turning that around. But just as we were so rich in fossil resources, we've also got this fantastic wealth of ambient energy, of wind and waves and tidal in particular, enough to power the United Kingdom in its entirety. And I think the symbolic power of a fossil fuel economy switching completely towards a renewable economy, and in fact more than switching completely, exporting more energy than it actually uses itself, and going even carbon negative, in other words reducing total carbon emissions below its total use of carbon emissions. So in other words, if you use 100 million tonnes and you cut 120 million tonnes, for example, that could have the power of example which could shake up the way in which the problem is perceived by many countries around the world. And there was at Copenhagen, as we saw, that perfect circle of blame where everybody pointed the finger at everybody else and said, well, we can't act because those Chinese aren't acting, and the Chinese say, well, we can't act because you guys aren't acting, and you were the ones who caused the problem in the first place. And everybody blames everyone else, and no one breaks that deadlock. Someone's got to break it. And strange as it may seem, because we're such a small country, because of our history, and because also of the fact that we have got progressive people in Cardiff who are doing a pretty good job already in terms of energy efficiency, in terms of renewables, we could be among the nations which breaks that deadlock by showing that we are deadly serious about dealing with this problem. Because until the Western nations show they're deadly serious, the rest of the world is simply not going to bother. Why should they? We've had our fun, we've consumed our fossil fuels. Until we show that we're going to stop consuming fossil fuels and stop producing fossil fuels, incidentally, stop digging them out of the ground, because if we're going to stop using them, we've got to stop digging them as well, then other countries aren't going to act until that point.
So where does the responsibility for action lie then? Is it the heads of states? Is it government, the scientific community, the people? Where does the responsibility for action in terms of climate change start?
Well, it stops with all of us, and one of the problems we face at the moment is that some governments, including the UK government and the Welsh Assembly government, are actually ahead of the people on this. That's the uncomfortable truth we must face. And short of sacking the electorate and appointing a new one, we've got to do something about that, and that something is to be much more effective in showing people what's happening and showing people why this is important. Because you can't sustain that gap forever. I mean, if the politicians are too far ahead of the people for too long, then the policy will collapse. It cannot be sustained. And people don't want to take action on climate change. They don't even want to know about climate change, just as you don't want to know that you're seriously ill if you go to the doctor. We go into denial about it. It's an understandable response. But it's not a response we can afford to indulge, because this is a deadly serious issue which is already causing suffering around the world and will cause a great deal more unless we tackle it.
Now that you've just mentioned that people can take action, and people are very often told that it is their individual actions that can have that impact, but very often then they look at places like the United States and Canada, and they look at the consumption levels there, and they just kind of go, well, what can I do individually? There is just this sense of disempowerment. There isn't that belief that one individual can make that difference. And do you think that individual actions could actually, you know, get us there?
Well, we can't do anything by ourselves. I mean, there's this sort of myth of individual action, which is sort of very much almost a sort of Thatcherite myth that, you know, you don't need society, you don't need collective action, you can do all this by yourself, stick a solar panel on your roof and you solve the problem, which in Wales, without a great deal of sunshine, is not a very likely scenario. We have to get out of that atomized mindset and think of ourselves as part of society, not just as individuals. We can't do anything alone. I mean, the fact is that we're totally dependent on each other. And if we're to deal with a global issue like climate change, we have to act with other people as much as possible. And that means that primarily we must be citizens, not consumers. That we must act to put pressure on governments rather than just buying a better brand of biscuits and hope that's going to solve the problem somehow. It won't, it can't. We've got very, very little power as consumers, but we've got tremendous power as citizens if only we use it. And the problem is, you get into a vicious circle where people say, oh, the politicians aren't listening to us, we can't do anything anyway, so you withdraw from politics so the politicians listen to you even less. We have to reverse that and say, we recognise this is a tremendously important issue. The politicians are doing okay in it, they're doing pretty well actually, but they have to go much further. If we're going to prevent, say, 2 degrees of global warming, which most people regard as the critical amount of global warming, beyond which a lot of really serious stuff starts to happen, then we actually have to go considerably beyond the targets which have been set by nations like the United Kingdom and Wales. We have to go beyond those targets to even tougher and more ambitious ones.